guys, this is Brazilian Nick, and welcome to part 1 of my PMDG Jetstream 41 tutorial flight. We're going to go basic. This is version 1. We're going to do a second set that goes into a lot more detail with the systems and other cool things that you can do with this plane. But for right now, this basic one is going from Seattle to Glacier Park International. But we need to get this plane in a cool and dark sort of state in order to get this thing done right. First thing you're going to do is we're going to turn off the engines and get them set on the start locks. This tutorial, part 1, is going to consist of getting the engines turned off, putting it on the start locks, getting it set in a cold and dark type environment, and then we're going to go through a quick walkthrough of the cockpit. And number 2 is going to have the actual startup sequence. We will get all that set and then we'll move on to the flight plan and insert that into the FSX. But for now, we need to go all the way up to the aft overhead panel. Because this plane does not have a 2D panel, we have to do it in the VC. I'm cool with it. I'm not going to mess around with any other different like wonky angles or something like that. I'm using the default VC just like I fly. I'm not using track IR today or the easy dot camera. Basically at the back of the, or the top of the aft overhead panel, we're going to have the engine management area, which is literally at the back center of the overhead panel here. So I have 2 switches. These are the stop switches, and we're going to right click on each of these little plastic covers, little safety deals, so some dumb pilot doesn't get his grubby fingers up and push them in the middle of flight. Imagine that, right? We're going to left click on the stop button, and then I'm going to hold down F2, which is my thrust reverse, in order to get these things onto the start blocks. So I'm going to hit F1 first just to make sure my throttles are at their minimum, because we did just start the flight up. I did move my throttle position a little bit. So definitely make sure that we are back at idle. So left click on stop, and I'm holding down F2, and hopefully my start locks are engaged here. Let's see, propellers are feathered out and they are not taken. And it might just be because I have screwed around with my buttons recently, screwing around with Easy Dock, that's not working. Generally, when you turn the engines off, if you hold down or hold the throttles into reverse, it will sit on the start locks, but it's not that big of a deal. This plane is notorious for burning up engines, and people cry and complain back when it came up, but that is what it is. And why is that? I'm going to go ahead and silence that radio here. Oops, did I do that? I sure did. I'm sorry. Back to what I was saying here. This plane is notorious for burning up engines on start and takeoff from people who don't understand that it uses start locks. This plane is the PMDG Jetstream 41. It is an awesome friggin' plane. The cool thing about it, though, is that it has these geared propellers. The geared props allow it to have almost instantaneous torque. So when I mash the go pedal here, it's going to move. Unlike something like, say, a King Air or our friend the Dash 8 next to us there. They hit the throttle and it's got the little bit of turbo lag on this. It's bam, I'm done, I'm in, I'm good to go. It's cool. Downside is it uses gears and puts it on this little start locks here in order to get it started up. Otherwise, the resistance from the propellers in that location there on startup could burn up the motor, and we don't want that. So, fiery death ensue. We don't need anything like that. So this is a common problem that a lot of new pilots to this plane have. So we're going to remedy this. The easiest way to do this is, let's hit F1 again to make sure our throttle is in the default position. And then there's these red latch release buttons on the center panel. We're going to tackle this before we get anything set. I want these things on the start locks before we shut the plane down. I'm going to right click on the left throttle latch release, and then there's this unfeather button, and we're going to left click that to click it to the left. And magically, my propellers are going to move into the feathered out position. And now what we're going to do is to set this on the start lock, we're going to pull the left throttle back into reverse. So it's there. We're going to put that back up into idle, and then right-click that latch release. I'm sorry, left-click the latch release. And now my propeller is sitting on the start lock. I'm not going to have any issue starting it up with it blowing up right at startup. Obviously, before we taxi and everything, we're going to get it off the start lock. But that is that. So I'm going to repeat the same for the right side. Right-click on the latch release. Right-click this time on the unfeather, and we will see that our friend, the propeller, actually moves on the model to show you that they are, in fact, out on the start locks. I'm going to go ahead and pull that throttle back into reverse. We were good to go there. Now we are up on the start lock, and then left click again on that right latch release to go ahead and set that up. My propellers aren't going anywhere, and we are set up for when it comes time to take off without blowing anything up, which is good. I don't want to die, and my passengers don't want to die today. Next step, we're going to return to the overhead panel. We are sitting, we just turned everything off, so I'm going to go ahead and right-click the yellow buttons over the avionics master to get the protector off. Left-click on the left, left-click on the right. That's going to turn the avionics off. We're going to move over, left-click on the battery, generator off, battery off. And that is all there is to that. Very simple to get this thing set up. There's a Lewis script out there to get everything set to a complete cold and dark setup. But most people who fly, including me, really don't need that. I usually fly with the FS2 crew, and he takes care of all the goodies for me. But not today. Like I said, it's basic flight. This is, typically what 90% of all the pilots out there flying the plane will probably fly it somewhere similar to this. Versus a full automatic, full dead cold and start plane hasn't been flown in days sort of setup. We're going to start with an overview here of the overhead panel, and on the aft overhead panel is the engine management area and the fuel. So we have the fuel, left and right shutoff valves, crossfeed, and then the standby pumps. The standby pumps come into play when we go to start the motors. Next you have your left and right engine start switches. Then there's our friendly stop switches that we just use. This is the start master, so obviously when it comes time we're going to hit left ground to start the left ground and hit the start button, right for the right. Fuel instrument you're really not going to use much. Manual start you probably won't use much if ever. But there is procedure, and I will go over that in a different tutorial on how to manual start a plane or the engines, something like in flight or something crazy. We'll see. Computers and ignition switches, these you really don't use. Your prop synchro as well. Oil cooler flaps are always on auto for the most part. Your ignition's usually set on the middle button, which is normal, right? Next step down is your electronic buses. These are little master deals. Really don't use and screw around with all that stuff for the most part. Just leave them the way they are. Next is over here, of course, is your voltage, your voltmeter. Battery showing 25 volts. If I do use things, these numbers will go down, and we don't want to drain the battery, so when I do go to start, I'm going to be using a GPU. Here's our avionics master again, and then our the actual generators and everything. So I have a left battery, a left generator, then there's the ground power / battery assist to the top, and ground power to the bottom. 99% of the time, if you're going to use ground power, you're going to use the ground power / battery assist. Just makes things easier when it comes to swapping. Next thing you're going to have is the right generator right battery, and then the instrument lighting for night lighting. Your emergency lights, next thing down, then you got your beacon, which will turn off, nav, ice, strobes, landing, taxi, all the good stuff. Your normal cabin signs for the seat belts, and then the smoking to let everyone know that since it's 2012, that no smoking is still not allowed on a plane. I think people would know that by now, but apparently not. Next one down is your anti-ice panel, and the only thing you're really going to use on here, for the most part, is going to be the airframe auto cycle. But sometimes, depending on what's going on, you can and will use the other ones. But I'd say 75-90% of the time, somewhere in there, that airframe anti-cycle switch takes care of your anti-ice and then your windshield and everything heat. We have a compass, and then the combing panel. Part of the combing panel, of course, is your floodlights for the panel. Ground proximity, you have your very bad master warning. Something really deadly is coming up. You better fix it, land, bail out, do what you got to do. And then below that's your yellow, your caution. Something needs to be attended to. There's my phone going off in the background. Next up is your spoilers. And arm, disarm, that lights up during the time. Next is for the electronic HSI. This is the control panel to set it, to nav or back to VOR and all your heading bugs and stuff like that. We'll go through those as when the plane is turned on. We have a flight plan loaded in. Windshield wipers above that. Your autopilot trim power. You're going to want that on pretty much all the time. Then you're going to have your course. And course, obviously, to set your course, set up for VOR or ILS, that sort of stuff. Your IAS knob sets your speed bugs. The plane is not equipped with VNAV, so this is pretty much 99% for your reference. And then, of course, the heading for heading hold on your autopilot or turn to heading. Next, you have your outside air temperature, your true airspeed. The big Alt button is to set the cruise altitude for the autopilot. Then, of course, there's the first officer course. Your autopilot functions are all done up top, just like pretty much every other plane known in existence, as far as airliners go. These are your nav systems, AHRS and stuff like that. These you really won't mess with ever. Then you have a first officer windshield wiper, and then of course ground disconnects, the same warning lights, same EFIS panel. Coming back down, we have our your watch, your clock, your chronometer. This FCS control switches whoever has pilot in control at that point, so you can switch from first officer to pilot. Next is your DME equipment, your VOR ADF, your attitude indicator, and then your electronic horizontal situational indicator, which has all the LNAV functions and everything built into it. Your altimeter, your backup attitude indicator, a backup altimeter, and a backup speed gauge. This big gauge right here is empty, and that is because it's for a non-existent weather radar, because PMDG has not and will not model one, because apparently Flight Simulator can't do it realistically, even with the I know Reality XP makes a gauge that you can pop in here, but obviously it's not done 100% the way it should be done. The range buttons do work though, and this is going to control your range on your map for LNAV on your flight plan. Next up is the Radio 1, so your Nav 1, your Com 1, all that stuff, TCAS, transponder. You have your steam gauges. These things are friggin' awesome. They're very well modeled, and you'll see that here shortly. Obviously we have our torque, and we can set the torque with a little knob on the bottom. And then we have EGT, which is basically how you fly the plane by EGT, RPM, and then fuel flow and fuel quantity. Above those, you'll have your fuel and oil pressure gauge. And then this little switch, which is I'm going to shift backspace to look up. This is the APR, automatic power reserve, and generally you're going to fly with that off, but every now and then you'll see that you might need it on. If you read the manual, there's certain cases where you'd have it on and where you wouldn't have it. Now we have COM, nav2, all that good stuff on this radio. The FMC, of course. Fuel temperature gauge. You have your flap gauge to show your flap angle. Your landing gear. And then the cap. This right here basically kind of does the same thing that the Boeing recall thing does. It lights up as things go wrong or are set certain ways. Next you have your first officer attitude indicator, EHSI, DME equipment, his altimeter, radio panel for the volume, and then your 480F. Over on his side, it's going to be kind of hard to see. He's got all sorts of test switches over here that we can do all sorts of cool things with, and I will not run them through on this set of tutorials, but on the full set of really, really in-depth tutorials, I will go through that as well. You can click on the little knob to raise and lower your friend, the column. I don't like the column in my way, so I'm going to lower that bad boy down. Next up is your pressurization panel. This has your landing elevation. You can set it, or you can set it on auto and just let it go. Generally, I'd say 99% of the time, most people are probably going to leave it on auto. Hydraulic panel for your pressures and your valves and pumps. Air conditioning, just your packs. These are your flows. Nothing fancy. Next down you have the parking brake on the left, and this little bad boy down here is the clicky area is your gust lock. Don't screw with that. Please don't screw with your gust lock, because a lot of people get caught up and they misclick or something. Next thing you know, their gust lock's on and they have no idea why they can't go anywhere and turn. You have your throttle, which is the one that's moving here, and then you have your propeller condition to feather, unfeather, and you will use these in flight. You will use the condition levers, and we will use it during our cruise. Then we have our latch and unfeather buttons to get our start lock set up. Fire, 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 fire. We all know what those do, so they help put out fires. This middle is your elevator trim. Depending on how fast you have your everything set and what you're using, depends on how fast this thing's going to move. So that is that. Next thing is your bank limit, your autopilot, yaw guy. This right here, this one that I'm moving, your yaw, not yaw guy, yaw damper. Can't talk today. This controls your vertical speed for the autopilot. Then I'm going to have the flaps. As I move it, it moves. It sounds real nice. Everything in this plane moves. It switches. Everything sounds the way it's supposed to, which is freaking awesome. Then you have your trim for the rudder trim and the aileron trim. And then you have our friend, the speed card. And these are what we use to set the V speeds. But we'll get into that when it comes time to set those up. Then, of course, I have the weight and balance load manager sheet. I can change all sorts of stuff on this thing. I can add passengers, remove passengers, add cargo. You tell it what you're going to tell it, and it does what you're going to do, which is pretty nifty, and I wish more planes had something similar to this. Most of the PMDG planes have little sneaky cuts in there to put zero fuel weights and stuff like that, but this lets you set everything and give you a sheet to set everything else by, and that just left clicks on the top of the board there. So that's a little overview of the inside. On the outside, of course, you have your ailerons, elevator, rudder. It's not going to do a whole lot with everything set up right now. You do have access to our friend, the ramp manager. So if you hit your Alt button, this little menu pops up, and then we go to Views, and then Instrument Panel, and that's your ramp manager. Now I can throw a ground power unit by clicking on it or taking it away. Baggage cart, if I so deem necessary. I can open exits, or I can close exits. I can open everything. I can put chocks. I'm going to leave it right now with everything locked up, but with the GPU in place because we will use it. I am sitting on parking number 3 of default Seattle. I do have the Orbex scenery installed, so the area around it is a little bit nicer. And by a little bit, I mean a whole lot nicer. I normally run Rex with the weather and everything, but for this flight, I just have it on, was it clear skies or whatever it happens to be, just the default deal. But that's it for part number 1. Next one, we will go into getting the plane turned back on and things set up and ready and go through the engine start. All right, this is Brazilian Nick signing off.